project. So earlier on today, Prof. Theng presented our project and the different work packages. So I'll just be picking a few findings from each of the work packages to present. So we're in Singapore. Singapore is a very fast-growing country with the research community is really growing at a fast and rapid pace. And as a case study, it's a very young community as well. So we found Singapore to be a very interesting case study to look at. Earlier today we saw the case study of Austria, which has similar things but also very different. So we wanted to find out if the fast pace of or the increase in number of publications, if the augmented data that these publications attract, if it's increasing as well. And we also wanted to find out how do the metrics of these publications relate to the established traditional citation accounts. So the key findings were that augmented coverage of publications, that means publications with at least one augmented, like a tweet, has increased rapidly from 7% in 2009 to 28% in 2013. Of course, it would now be nice to update it with the recent years. Overall, across all the disciplines, there was like an 18% coverage. We see, however, in this chart that medicine is the leading field. And we have seen this in many other studies as well. So somehow medicine, biochemistry, they attract a lot of metrics. And this is true for Singapore as well. And we found a small to medium correlation between citation counts and metrics. Again, not surprising. So Singapore is quite normal in those terms. So we'll continue looking at this picture. So in the next few years, we'll be updating this field to see how it progresses. Then we had a study to find out amongst researchers who knows about metrics. Do people know about traditional metrics at all and of metrics? So we had this study to investigate the awareness and familiarity of both kinds of metrics and their usage and the hindrances for not using them. And we also investigated the strategies they used to promote their research. So the MTU case study with the interviews of the researchers was presented earlier on from my colleague. And here we decided to try an online survey. However, we faced this fatigue of online surveys. So the first attempt got us only 85 participants. And then we then tried to, motivate them to take part. So we said, okay, you will get an incentive. And then we were lucky at the, I think it was the 3 a.m. conference. We got Springer Nature to help us as well to send on their lists. So in the end, we had 440 participants, so we were happy about the increase. The key findings are that the awareness and usage of alternatives is still quite low. So that's established. However, we used the technology acceptance model to find out what is associated with the usage of metrics. And we found out that social media usage is associated with the actual usage of metrics. That's not so surprising. However, the perceived ease of use and perceived usefulness of metrics are also key elements to the actual usage of metrics. And we found out that the hindrances for not using metrics were, researchers kept saying, yeah, we don't see the benefit, why should we use them? So it wasn't so much like, what are they? That was low, but it was also, why should we use them? Why bother? I want to do something else with my time. And we saw this as well in the case study of the Yin-Leng University. There's this fatigue of, oh, I have to do something else apart from research. I just want to do my research. Then we looked at, you could say, the publishers or the academic journals. And we had this question like, okay, are the journals promoting the papers that they have? And how are they doing this? So we actually got the list of journals from Web of Science, or the different indices. And then came the tricky part. We had a whole room full of students, and we locked them in for a day, of course with some sweets, and we got them to look for every journal's Facebook account or Twitter account. And Facebook and Twitter kept locking us out because we were doing multiple queries. But we finally got the data together, and yes, there is a low social media presence. It's between 14% for AHCI to about 7% for the other indices. For Facebook and for Twitter, similar values. And we also found that a higher journal impact factor is associated with the followers on social media. So this is a chicken and egg question. So are they following because it has a high journal impact factor, or is it because it's so good? So those are questions. And we then looked at the posting behavior. So for Facebook, we see that something happened in 2009-10. So they suddenly started posting a lot of Facebook posts. And yeah, we see that the Science Citation Index is really strong posting content. We also looked at their Twitter usage, and we see here that surprisingly, the journals post about general web content. So they don't say, go and read my paper, this paper that we have published, but they actually try to broaden the communication beyond the research community to make it more interesting to the general public. So that was actually very interesting. Like the arts and humanities, or the arts, they were like tweeting about museums or art galleries. So that was really interesting to see. Then we also saw that the inter-journal communication was only within a certain index. So we didn't have so much multidisciplinary tweeting or retweeting. So that was also interesting that the disciplines remain within themselves, communication. Then this was a surprise study. I met Charlie Rappel at the 2 a.m. conference. And we got to do this study for Kudos. They provided their data sets. So Kudos is a UK-based company, and they aim to support researchers to put out their work, to show the good work they've done. So it's like pimping your publication. So you get to give it a nice name, a more catchy abstract. You can attach a video to it, or a data set, or any presentation you want to attach to your publication. And then you can share it on Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn. And that link you share, they actually trace how many times it gets clicked on. So these Kudos actions, we had a bunch of papers from the Kudos dataset that had these actions. And we also had other authors in Kudos that hadn't done any actions on their papers. So that was the treatment group, those with the Kudos actions, and the control group were those papers without Kudos actions. And then we measured the increase in full text downloads from the time the author claimed that this is my publication in Kudos to the time we extracted the data. And we actually found a significant difference between the two groups. So those that had Kudos actions actually had more downloads. So this was interesting. However, we can't say for sure that this leads to any more collaboration or citations or anything. So we can just say that putting yourself out there and telling the world, hey, I did something good, it actually brings an audience, or it brings your attention to your paper. What happens afterwards, we still can't answer. So this is the closest we got to answering the question if it's worthwhile to spend your time on social media or working on your publications after publishing to make it known to a wider audience. So these were just a few key findings from our project. And I'll hand over to Prof. Theng to motivate the panel.
Thank you, Moji. Yeah, so so these are several of the study findings. And when we started the project, like I mentioned earlier on, we do not know much about our metrics, and the grant was given, for us to understand more about our metrics and the impact to research. 3 years into looking at this area, we realized that we know very little. And we begin to ask ourselves this question. Really, if we look at the studies, right? Our faculty researchers, they have very little, awareness of our metrics. And journals are desperately trying to introduce social media to publicize, the papers. There is, possibly a good correlation to, actions done on articles, on papers that could bring about attention and awareness to, research impact. So, as the team were actually discussing on what then will be the theme of the, the panel discussion, so we came up with this, topic, and we asked ourselves, is are metrics, worthwhile for us to study? Are we? I like what Stacey actually showed in terms of the diagram. You have the big dinosaur with a tiny person pulling it. If you are the lone researcher, is this a too huge problem for us to be pulling along? Is it a big dinosaur for us to solve? Is it worthwhile? And because there are so many changes that are happening in social media, will Facebook stay? Will Twitter stay? And will the metrics also evolve? Questions like, will there be new metrics that we want to anticipate? As the team were actually discussing, is there a possibility of it being, discipline-centric in terms of an metric score? What about Asian-centric? Because I think there were some discussions on, the nuances in terms of, posts in social media. Will that actually have an impact on the metric score? Will there ever be an Asian-centric metric score? And lastly, what would be expected in terms of the usage of metrics? If the university and the research community recognize metrics as the, major, one of the indicators of, promotion and tenure, will that change researchers in the way that we do research, so that we will actually be doing more research that will actually impact society? Because metrics is really measuring, impact, popularity, not necessarily quality, but but actually is getting the the research out in the community. So we have a lot more questions that we can answer ourselves as a research team, and that's the reason why we have convened a panel, a panel to be able to discuss some of these questions. So we are very pleased to have, maybe the next slide. Yeah, we're very pleased to have lined up experts, experts, that come from different, fields, with different opinions. Prof. Edie, Prof. Fu, Prof. Na, Stacey and Prof. Mike, I think they will be able to actually present, their perspectives in terms of whether metrics will survive beyond now to 2030. And unfortunately, Rick is not able to join us because of personal reasons. And like a very informal session like this, we're so grateful that Edie just started to be the chair of the last session, and we are so pleased to even invite impromptu, Tina as well as Stephanie to also join us in a panel discussion. So, and this session will be moderated by Michael. Okay, so may I invite the, the panel to take the front, the seat in front. No, I'm not an expert. Okay.